In today's video, I'm going to give 5 things that I think every engineering graduate and student should learn how to do. And this is based on my experience in private equity, engineering, consulting, and having actually worked on multi-million-dollar engineering projects. So the first skill every engineering student and grad should have is basic accounting. Okay, so within that, what I mean is you need to learn how to read a financial statement, a 3 statement model, which consists of your P&L, your balance sheet, and your cash flow statement. And within each of those things, there are a few important items that I want you guys to grasp and understand. So within your P&L, which is just a measure of how profitable a company or business unit is, you really need to understand the difference between gross profit and operating profit. This video is just high level overview. I could do a breakdown into each of these and other stuff. Within the balance sheet, you need to learn the difference in assets, liabilities, and equity at a high level. And in the cash flow statement, there are a few really important things you need to understand. First is the difference between cash flow from operations, finance, and investing. 3 very different types of cash flow in a business. Also, CapEx. This is a really big thing in the engineering world because there are a lot of investments made into large capital projects, and how you account for that really plays an impact in the long-term prospects of a company. And the last thing is working capital. A really, honestly, for any industry or business you're in, it's a really important part of the financial health of a company. The second skill you guys need to develop is financial modeling. Okay, now I learned financial modeling at London School of Business and Finance, and one of the 2 important things they taught us that engineers need to learn how to do is 1, projections. How do you project revenue for a business unit versus costs for a business unit, and what are the assumptions included in that? The second thing is investment analysis. Okay, and this sort of branches into the CFA that I did. So within investment analysis, there are a few key metrics that every engineering project is more or less evaluated on. And to be honest, every investment is evaluated on. IRR, internal rate of return, MOIC, multiple on invested capital, and lastly, payback period. Payback period, from personal experience, when pitching engineering projects for investment, that is one that always came up from investors and also customers as well. Because if you want a customer to invest in your product, and it's quite expensive, there's sort of 2 ways you could go about it in the industry at a high level. There's the upfront investment, or there's sort of like a leasing model. If you do get them to do the upfront investment, then proving to them that there is a attractive payback period is more or less how you're going to convince them to use the product, assuming it's a good product. The third thing, which is a massive one right now, is AI. You need to be AI literate. So arguably the best AI model on the market right now is Claude. So learning, for example, how to build financial models in Claude, systems design, dashboards. These are all things that you should be learning how to do, and you could do your own projects on these. The fourth thing is actually related to legal stuff. And this is actually something that I underestimated, but when working on like multi-million-dollar engineering projects, I gained a lot of exposure to the legal process. And I'm just going to give you guys a few examples of contracts that you as an engineering student or grad, it'll be really good for you to get some experience on. First is supply agreements with technology providers. So for example, we had an 8-figure contract with a technology provider from Europe for a piece of distillation equipment. Okay, now working on that contract was so insightful because I was literally working with chemical engineers who were also negotiating and directing like those negotiations on the contract. But these guys started off, you could literally check out their resumes, they started off as graduate engineers and they progressed to a role where they were running a business unit. But when they're running that business unit, they now had to develop these skills here, such as contract negotiation, structuring a contract, how to do an effective markup or red line of a contract, how to implement recommendations that actually made sense. So for example, if the payable terms weren't very favorable, could you come back with something that made sense? The second type of contract that's actually really interesting, you guys should get some experience with, is EPC, engineering, procurement, construction contracts. EPC is basically the people who build the plant. right? So, for example, if you're doing a greenfield project, so you're building from the ground up, you get people to come in and design it. Then you get a group of people to bring in the materials, sort out the workers, and then actually build it from the ground up. That's your EPC. And then it goes into commissioning, so then you have an operating team for that. The EPC are one of the biggest stakeholders in large projects, and they can play a critical role in whether it's delivered on time or late, whether it's on budget or over budget, okay? Lastly is offtake agreements. These are super, super interesting legal contracts that, to be honest, a lot of degrees don't even touch really commercial law. However, having worked in it, I saw that if you really want to climb in like the engineering investment world, understanding the concept of an offtake contract, how is the price established for the whatever product or material you're establishing an offtake agreement for, and who are you doing it with? Is it with a customer or a supplier? Because they have different motivations to you, okay? All super interesting stuff. And lastly, this is just high level sales, okay? I don't think any STEM grad is taught sales, but you're gonna have to learn it if you want to progress. So I'd say you don't need to be like the Wolf of Wall Street or anything, but if you could just learn the concept of a sales funnel, okay? What is a sales funnel, okay? Well, you have leads that come in at the top. The leads at the top are either inbound or outbound. What does that mean? The inbound leads are people who come in because they're already aware of your brand. Outbound are leads that come in because you maybe cold call them or cold email them. Then once they're in the funnel, the goal is to convert them into a paying customer. And then once they're in there, you want to keep them in the funnel. This is not covered in an engineering degree. Maybe management for business modules in business schools do cover this, but these are all things I learned from being in industry. And in hindsight, I think a lot more engineering programs should be covering this stuff. This is what we're doing in our Imperial Edge summer program. We have several different tracks which you could go to our website to check out. But a couple that are super interesting is our financial analyst bootcamp and then the engineering bootcamp. So if you're interested in either of those, fill out the form on the website and also follow our page. We'll be covering more content like this and also doing some sector deep dives. Let me know in the comments what sectors you want me to do deep dives on. I've received comments for biotech, energy, and robotics. So if there's anything else you want me to break down, let me know. And also from an investment angle too, I'm happy to do that. See you guys soon.